banish you to the world of Pagan. No one here knows of the Avatar.
Hey everyone, I'm Fox with Foxio Games, and this is Ultima VIII Pagan. Ultima VIII Pagan is actually not even the 8th game in the numbered Ultima series. It's actually the 9th because Ultima VII had 2 parts, each sold as a separate game, but later came as a complete collection. Ultima VIII is unquestionably considered the downward turn for the series. Not only was the expansion never completed or released for the game, but the main storyline itself is significantly unfinished. Is this 1994 title still worth playing today? Well, let's find out. Not much to say in the settings department, given the game's age and 2D art. You can turn the sound of footsteps on or off, and this is important as the constant clacking sounds of walking and running will bother some people. I'm playing the game via Pentagram, a program for Ultima VIII that is akin to Exalt was for Ultima VII. It's not nearly as feature-rich or expansive, though. It's a more bare-bones front end to run the game, but it does get the job done and allows me to play with the screen stretched to widescreen format. Some people despise 4x3 games stretched out, but in this case I prefer it. I'll show you a comparison of running the game via DOSBox to get a mostly authentic look, and running the game under Pentagram for an arguably better visual experience. You decide for yourself and take your pick. Also, Pentagram ran the game more smoothly and eliminated the nasty screen tearing I was getting under DOSBox. Graphically, the game isn't bad. It's technically a step above Ultima VII's game engine. It's not a big step, mind you, but overall it does look a bit better, at least technically. In terms of the art style, I'd much prefer either part of Ultima VII, but Pagan is not a bad-looking game, at least not for the time. It's definitely a change, however. A lot of the game is darker in nature, with many things having a reddish tint or color, and it feels less colorful and vibrant overall. The sound effects in the game are better engineered this time around than in the previous 2 titles, which suffered from excessively quiet or loud effects at times. It appears they fine-tuned and tweaked their use of sound effects in Ultima VIII, so that's a definite plus. The music, on the other hand, is not a step up. It's mostly atmospheric stuff that just kind of exists. None of the songs stand out as particularly memorable, and although they fit the mood and aesthetic of Pagan, they ultimately disappoint. The Guardian has some spoken lines in the game, and those are rather good. Excellent voice work for that stuff. Unfortunately, the rest of the game's voice work is either mediocre or just outright bad.
Well done, mortal. The item of Blackrock which you now possess is the first key to unlocking tremendous power within yourself.
I swear this guy intentionally tried to sound as uninterested and distant as possible. I can just see him rolling his eyes as he reads the lines on his script. This speech pack was sold as an addition to the original game's release, so people had to actually pay for this voice work. Can you imagine that? Remember how I criticized the combat from Ultima VII as clunky, messy, and mostly hands-off? Yeah, well, I wish we had that messy automated combat back right now, because Ultima VIII does give you direct control over the combat, but it's far from an improvement. It ends up being a very poor man's Diablo. Click to attack, or more accurately, click to miss and occasionally land a hit. You have to double click for each strike or attempted strike, and the vast majority of them miss even when you're at max stats and equipped with a powerful magic weapon. The enemies are generally much more accurate with their attacks though, and have no qualms about beating you to a pulp. So plan to die. A lot. At all max stats and using one of the most powerful weapons in the game, if not the most powerful depending on how you look at it, I die to a standard ghost the majority of the times I try to fight them. And no, these ghosts aren't special enemies, just run-of-the-mill regular enemies that you encounter frequently. Sometimes I have to swing 10 or more times just to land a single hit on one of these ghouls, a fairly weak and common enemy type. The good news is that you can walk just far enough to scroll an enemy off screen, and in some cases they'll just disappear. Or dead enemies will return to life, so I guess that's a somewhat fair trade-off for abusing that cheap tactic. Speaking of enemies, the game has extremely few enemy models. Most consist of ghouls, ghosts, and skeletons, which sounds like a good title for a Halloween-themed video game. There are some wildlife enemy types and a few others like trolls and demons, but you'll see the same handful of enemies over and over and over throughout the entirety of the game. The game suffers from a serious lack of variety in more ways than one. The game has very few pieces of armor and few weapons. Most corpses and treasure chests have either nothing of value or very little. The vast majority of everything you can search in this game will have absolutely nothing of worth. You get so discouraged that you start skipping searching stuff, but then you start second guessing yourself like, what if that corpse just happened to have something useful? I know the last 10 treasure chests were virtually useless, but what if this one happens to have a really cool magic item? So then you start searching again, and guess what? Yeah, usually nothing. So you may be thinking that after killing enemies you gain experience, right? Nope. There are no levels, no experience points, no training points. You only improve one of 3 stats, and this is done by monotonous repetition. To improve your strength, just swing your weapon. Even at literally nothing, just swing away at the air. Want to increase your intelligence? Just read a book, or cast a spell. You can even read the same book over and over again, countless times until you max out. You start the game as a male avatar and only choose your name, no more gender option. You don't pick a class either, but that was missing from Ultima VII as well. The avatar looks really weird. By default, you appear to be wearing a set of plate mail armor with an Ankh design on the chest and a bucket helmet. Why they chose this default look is a mystery to me, because it certainly doesn't feel right. You start the game solo, which makes sense, but that's also how you finish the game. There are no companions and no party mechanics here. The avatar is alone throughout the entire game. Ultima has given you party members in all of the main series games for a long time now, so it feels odd to take that away. I'm not saying it can't work. After all, being banished to Pagan is the perfect opportunity to force the avatar to venture out alone in a strange new world, but ultimately it feels like there's less to do now, and the lack of party interaction serves to make the game feel more empty and hollow. And that is precisely how I felt upon playing the game, that the entire game is mostly hollow and empty. There's so much less to do, less to see, less to interact with, fewer people to talk to, fewer places to go, fewer side quests, just less of everything. Remember how I mentioned that the game's storyline is incomplete? Yeah, well, it's not just incomplete, the game is simply unfinished. Ultima VIII was released back in March of 1994, and it was before the modern trend of releasing incomplete games. Had the game just been buggy and unstable, that'd be par for the course for many computer role-playing games, but it would have been unusual for Origin. Instead, it's outright unready for public release, at least originally upon release, and still to this day even. Story arcs, plot points, characters, and dialogue trees are all clearly missing. There are areas of the game you can't access but clearly are meant to. There are story arcs that can be started but never completed. Books and characters in the game mention things that are missing from the game entirely. Dialogue trees begin for certain plot points, but then suddenly just stop. An entire class of magic is missing from the game, and given the progress of the main quest, it's obvious that the accompanying quest line is also missing. The first portion of the game involving the Earth Titan Lithos is rather long and involved, including a lot of running around, long dungeons and caverns, learning a new magic system, backtracking back and forth, and ultimately feels pretty lengthy and complete. The other Titans quests are much shorter, and one of them has no accompanying magic system whatsoever, really highlighting how the development was increasingly rushed as they completed the later portions of the game. The game also gives you virtually no direction or guidance whatsoever. I have no idea how you're expected to know where to go or what to do without using a walkthrough. Seriously, this is one of those games that just leaves you hanging, and the incomplete sections of the game just add to the confusion. There's food in the game, just like previous Ultimas, but it's basically worthless. You don't get hungry, and although you can eat the food, it doesn't appear to do anything. I've read that it heals you, but I've eaten lots of food while low on health and noticed zero effect, so I don't know what that's about. I think a few mushrooms do heal you, but most food appears to be utterly useless, another likely unfinished aspect of the game. What is finished isn't even that good. Just as an example, you have to find a dagger for a certain character. Lady Mordea has the dagger at her palace, so you have to find a way to get it back. Do you have a series of side quests in which you do favors for characters? Do you sneak in and steal it? Do you have to serve Lady Mordea and receive it as a reward? No. You talk to her servant at her home, and for no apparent reason, she just says she's going to trust you. You promise not to tell anyone, and she gives you a key to go unlock the chest where the dagger's at. That's it. No side quests, no favors, no bribery, no tricks. This is your first time even meeting this woman too, so why in the world would she risk her job as a servant of the ruler of the only city in the world of Pagan to give a complete stranger a key to a treasure in the palace? This is kind of lazy writing that plagues the game. Actually, it's really lazy writing. Compared to Ultima VII, where almost everyone who helped you had either a favor for you to do first, or a reasonable incentive to do so. No one here knows who you are, and should have no reason to trust you nor want to help you. The maidservant receives no favors, has no personal incentive, nor has any compelling reason to help you, but does anyway. Another example of lazy design? Stealing. In most cases, if someone is standing within view of you when you steal something, you will be instantly caught and frozen in place. A guy appears, the citizen blames you for stealing, and you are instantly dealt the punishment of death on the spot. That's it. No trial, no chance to respond, no jail time, no fighting back. Just instant death right there. This is pretty cheap and lame. The previous games gave you a chance to escape, or fight the guards, or actually go to jail. This is just instant death for stealing, even if you accidentally take something while fiddling around with the mouse cursor. You have to restart from your last save game, so an accidental theft death would really suck. I can't be entirely negative, however. The game does have some redeeming qualities. While it's a bit convoluted and not clearly spelled out for you, magic works a little differently this time around. Instead of casting spells from a spellbook, each class of magic functions in a unique way. While there are no water-based spells due to the game being incomplete, there are spells from the earth, fire, and air classes, and each class of magic functions differently, giving them each a unique feel. Given the change of location, most everything in the game is brand new to the Ultima series. There are many new spells, items, enemies, and area designs. But unfortunately, there's even more wrong with the game than right. One of the biggest problems with Ultima 8 is simply moving around. Controlling the avatar is miserably painful. The entire world is set at an isometric angle, but so are the cardinal directions. So north isn't directly up, it's up and to the right, at an angle. You cannot use the arrow keys to move around, and mouse movement is beyond atrocious. You'll be struggling just to line up the avatar to properly walk through a doorway. He loves to step just a bit too far past the door each way as you try to get through it, and at random times he prefers to take these slow baby steps instead of walking or running, despite holding the cursor out at the farthest point possible. When he does start running, he takes off like a horse starting a race, and it's way too easy to go flying off cliffs or into water, which spell instant death. Jumping and height are now a thing in the game, and that's not really a good thing. You'll have to climb up and jump to get around, but both are incredibly awkward and difficult to control. It's also hard to know where you can and can't do this. Falling too far a distance will harm or kill the avatar, and controlling your descent down from a ledge is nearly impossible. Jumping on platforms is infinitely better than it was thanks to the developer-released patch, but it's still clunky and unwieldy. You'll spend much of the game just trying to get the avatar to go up a set of stairs or through a narrow path without getting caught on a wall or overshooting and falling off a ledge. Basic movement in the game is positively miserable. So to add insult to injury, Origin thought they'd include a variety of environmental hazards, including but not limited to electricity nodes, rolling spiked balls, collapsing ground, exploding mushrooms, firing cannons, and falling stalagmites, or are they stalactites? I don't know. You know, the things that come from up above in a cavern. Whatever, you know what I'm talking about. You simply don't have the accuracy of control to be expected to reliably dodge these hazards, so just save often and sloppily run through it as best you can. Oh, and there are moving platforms to jump across too, so yeah, moving platforms. Yuck, right? I do believe though that with the patch, I think they stopped all of those platforms from moving, so thank goodness. But when the game first came out, people jokingly called it Super Avatar Brothers. NPCs do have schedules, but barely. They generally just have 3 states: at their job, at home, and asleep. There's little to discover, and virtually none of them have anything interesting to say apart from the main storyline. Side quests are virtually non-existent. Interacting with NPCs is generally a waste of time. There are different time periods, but it's hard to tell since the lighting never changes. It's always twilight in the world of Pagan, even inside caves and dungeons. So, no need for light sources, I guess that's convenient. In kind with Ultima VII Serpent Isle, Ultima 8 Pagan features its own unique monetary system. This time, instead of gold, you collect obsidian coins. Unfortunately, after purchasing a few pieces of armor and a weapon from the blacksmith, there's virtually nothing of value worth buying. You'll quickly end up with way more money than you need, especially if you collect and sell all the various gems in the game. I had hundreds of coins mounting up with nothing to spend them on, so it feels disappointing as it ultimately makes the money and valuables in the game feel virtually worthless. Interacting with objects is almost as painful as movement in this game. You have to be ridiculously close to most things to interact with them, and sometimes that means stepping so close that your character blocks your own view of the item. You'll find yourself clumsily stepping all over things and stepping all around, trying to get close enough to interact, but not so close that you obscure your own view. You can't pick things up without being close either, which makes sense, but it's a constant annoyance here. To highlight just how bad this problem can get, watch me trying to manipulate items to prepare a focus for a sorcery spell. This looks like it'd be a cool in-game mechanic, but instead it's an exercise in frustration. After running around town collecting the ingredients I need, I finally bring it all together and start trying to follow the instructions for creating an endure heat focus. I have to place candles at the 5 points of the star, but the candles don't want to go in the exact spot. How perfect does it need to be? I don't know, but I'd rather not be too far off, so I keep trying to get the candle just perfectly in the right spot. Finally, it looks good enough, and then I start placing the reagents, but then I can't get one reagent in place properly because the candle I put down is blocking me due to the game's isometric angle. So I move the candle, place the reagent, then try to replace the candle, and now the candle won't go in the spot. I have to fiddle with it for a bit, all the while having to move my character back and forth because I'm not close enough to some items to interact with them. Finally, everything appears to be in place and I start clicking the pentagram in. Nothing. Click, 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 nothing, just a red X. I move around, click some more, I move the focus in the center, still no luck. I walk around the pentagram again, click again, nothing, walk more, click again. Oh, now it works. I have no idea what changed, but now suddenly clicking it works. After a short little animation, all of my candles, reagents, and the focus are destroyed and a demon appears and attacks me. The whole thing appears to have completely failed. It was at this precise moment that I threw up my hands and said, screw it, I'm done with this playthrough. I really don't need to play any further for this review since I've played the game multiple times before. It's this kind of painful tedium that bogs the game down and ultimately makes you feel like you're trying to tie a slippery knot with one hand. Oh, and you know those cool character portraits that the Ultima series has had since Ultima VI? You know how they got more detailed and larger up until Ultima VII Serpent Isle? Yeah, well, they're gone now. No portraits. You have almost no idea what anyone looks like. Their in-game models lack detail and are utterly faceless. This makes it harder to connect with the game and its characters, not to mention the lack of meaningful dialogue from most of them. Yes, some of the characters in Ultima 7 did get a little verbose, but I guess they went full 180 in Ultima 8. Most characters have virtually nothing important or interesting to say, and dialogue trees are generally much shorter and more generic. But as a final positive, the game has some truly fascinating and interesting moments. The sections where you meet the Titans are definitely awesome, both visually stunning and emotionally impactful. You really do feel like you're doing some significant stuff in the world of Pagan, and this alone could keep the hardcore Ultima fans interested enough to keep pushing through. Too bad it's bogged down in so many other issues. You know, before I started my latest journey through Ultima 8 Pagan, I had memories of the game being a disappointing Ultima entry, but at least a decent RPG in and of itself. Now that I've played it again for the first time in years, I'm convinced it's even less enjoyable than my nostalgia led me to believe. Terrible controls, monotonous combat, a sparsely populated world, mediocre music, and an unfinished storyline all combine to make Ultima 8 Pagan a thoroughly unenjoyable experience, in a journey only worth taking for the most hardcore of Ultima fans. I strongly recommend passing on this one. Well, it's unfortunate that the Ultima series took such a downward turn with Ultima 8, but I wish I could tell you that it gets better. It doesn't. In fact, it gets worse. Ultima 9 Ascension becomes the first entry in the series that I don't recommend anyone play, hardcore fan or otherwise. Ultima fans will be horribly disappointed by the game, not only for its design and mechanics, but also for its betrayal of the storyline and themes of the series. Ultima fans will find hundreds of issues with the game's presentation, story, lore, and dialogue, and many of them serious mistakes and outright errors in the series' mythos. Newcomers to the series will not understand much of what's going on, nor its significance in the story, and will be utterly unimpressed by Ultima 9's small world, lackluster combat, and confusing storyline. Ultima 9 is, in fact, such a bad game that I will not be reviewing it. I simply can't bring myself to play through it again. If you must know how the Ultima series ends, watch the conclusion of the game on YouTube. The final conclusion could have been really epic and emotional, if only it had not been prefaced by such a terrible game. A sad ending to our review of the Guardian trilogy, the Ultima series, that's for sure, but the good news is that I do plan to go backwards now and take a look at Ultima VI, the False Prophet, as well as the two Ultima Underworld games. I can't promise full reviews, but I will be doing videos on the three titles in one way or another. Hopefully they will be outright reviews. That's the plan anyway, life permitting. Using the fan-made front end for Ultima 6 called Nuvi, it makes just enough modifications to the game's interface to make it feel playable for me. I'd always struggled with Ultima 6's interface, and Nuvi might be just what I need to finally play through the game properly. As always, I want to thank you for watching, and make sure to follow me using the social media links in the description. I'm on Twitter, Gab, Facebook, Minds, Twitch, and all that good stuff, so hit me up there, and I will see you guys again real soon. Later, everyone.